The Battle of Thermopylae, a study of the 300 Spartans' strategic brilliance. At the beginning of the 5th century BCE, the Achaemenid Empire of Persia, which was governed by King Darius I, made an attempt to expand its territory into Greece. This attempt was made during the time period, one to increase the majesty of the king or to control rebellious kingdoms that were located on the western frontiers of Persia. It is highly likely that the goals of this desire were to accomplish one of these things. This is a possibility for both of these events. Darius wrote a letter to the Greeks in the year 491 BCE, imploring them to submit to his rule and submit to his authority. The message was addressed to the Greeks specifically. By forming an alliance between Athens and Sparta, and by assassinating Persian envoys, the Greeks were able to successfully resist his demands. The reaction that Darius employed was to send out a military expedition, which enabled him to take control of a stretch of the Aegean Sea and arrive in Greece. This was the consequence of the activities taken by Darius. Conversely, Athens emerged triumphant over the Persians at the Battle of Marathon, which took place between the two groups in the year 490 BCE. The battle was fought between the two factions. During the conflict, both regions were involved in the fighting. In the year 486 BCE, after Darius went away, his successor, Xerxes I, immediately began making tremendous preparations for an invasion of Greece on a large scale. During this invasion, the Persian Empire was established for the first time. The development of infrastructure, including as supply depots, a canal, and bridges, was a part of these preparations. The objective was to make it simpler for his soldiers to move around inside the battlefield. In response to the huge army of Persia's march in the year 480 BCE, the city-states of Greece banded together to establish a coalition in order to defend themselves adequately. When the Greeks were aware of the enormous extent of the Persian force, they made the decision to forego an early attempt to stop the Persians in the Tempe Valley for the time being. When everything was said and done, the ultimate defense strategy called for a small Greek force to be stationed at the Thermopylae Pass, which was a pass that was extremely narrow. When this army was finally put together, King Leonidas of Sparta would be the one in charge of running it. A fleet was also supposed to be stationed at Artemisium in order to prevent the Persian navy from outflanking them. The total number of troops engaged in the fight climbed to around 7,000 as a result of the fact that Sparta and her other allies only committed 300 elite men to the conflict. Due to the availability of a narrow pass, the geography played in favor of the Greeks during the Battle of Thermopylae. This was a significant factor in the outcome of the battle. Because of this pass, it became more challenging for the huge army and cavalry of Persia to carry out their operations in an efficient manner. During this conflict, the Greek hoplites were facing off against the Persian infantry. In order to secure a vital mountain path that could provide the Persians with a way to get around the pass, Leonidas positioned Phocian men in a precarious position. Even though they had a smaller number of soldiers than the Persians did, the Greeks were determined to make use of the geography in order to overcome the numerical advantage that the Persians enjoyed. This was the case despite the fact that the Persians had a numerical advantage. In the end, this would result in a war that would be decisive and unusual in its scale from the very beginning. This was despite the fact that the Greeks outnumbered their opponents by a significant margin. They were able to maintain their fight against the Persian warriors thanks to their better phalanx formation method, which ultimately led to their victory over their foes. On the very first day of the conflict, Xerxes sent the most elite members of his army, whom he referred to as the Immortals, with the mission of engaging in combat. The tide began to turn in their favor when, on the other hand, a Greek renegade by the name of Ephialtes identified a mountain road that had been concealed from view. Because of this, the Persians were able to flank the Greek fortress, which put the Greeks in a position where they were at a severe disadvantage. For this reason, the Persians were able to take advantage of the situation. it was possible for the Persians, under the command of Hydarnes and his elite immortal soldiers, to flank the Greek position and gain an advantage during the fight of Thermopylae. This was made possible by a traitor by the name of Ephialtes, who revealed to them the location of a hidden mountain tunnel. Because of this, they decided to leave. Despite the fact that the Greek position was now surrounded and it was becoming increasingly difficult to evacuate, Leonidas issued the order for the Greek fleet to retreat and instructed the majority of his warriors to go. In spite of the fact that this was the circumstance, he and his 300 Spartans, together with a few Thebans, came to the resolution that they would continue to fight collectively until the very end of the conflict. The decision that Leonidas took to behave in the manner that he did was motivated by a feeling of duty, honor, and military discipline. These were the elements that pushed him to make the choice that he did. He was also under the belief that his sacrifice would save Sparta, which was in accordance with a prophecy that was given by the Oracle of Delphi. In addition to this, he believed that his sacrifice would save Sparta. The remaining Greek warriors engaged in a fierce battle on the third day of the struggle. The battle was fought with the intention of delaying the Persian assault. The courageous attempt that Leonidas made to approach the Persian camp was ultimately futile, and the Greeks were ultimately defeated as a result of their failure. Nevertheless, in spite of the fact that the Spartans made an effort to retrieve his body, they were eventually unsuccessful in their endeavor to do so. Despite the fact that Leonidas and his men were vanquished, they were still able to achieve the status of heroes in Greek society. It was because of their sacrifice, which symbolized resistance against the tyranny of foreign forces, that they were able to achieve triumph. This was the reason for their success. Xerxes' advances were met with resistance from the Greek city-states, despite the fact that they had suffered several catastrophes, including the sacking of Athens. Even though they were consistently vanquished, this was the situation that they found themselves in. At the Battle of Salamis, which took place during the winter months, the Greek navy was victorious, achieving a decisive victory. It was in the Mediterranean Sea where this conflict took place. Under Cleombrotus' command was a defensive army that was stationed in Corinth throughout the conflict. Cleombrotus was not only the brother of Leonidas, but he also served that organization as their commander. The invasion had already been handed over to Mardonius, who was Xerxes' commander, despite the fact that he had not yet returned to Persia. This occurred during the time that it took for Xerxes to return to Persia. At the Battle of Plataea, which took place in the year 479 BCE, the Greeks ultimately prevailed against the Persians in a decisive manner because of their superior military capabilities. Having been unsuccessful in their attempts to negotiate with the Persians, the Greeks were finally able to achieve this triumph instead. The aspirations that Xerxes had of establishing a kingdom in Greece were thwarted as a consequence of this event. Thanks for watching and subscribing channel.